Good morning, and it's about 7:30 on the first, I suppose, proper day of my trip. And at the moment I'm walking through the old town of Beersheva. Now, to be quite frank, the old town makes it sound a lot nicer than it is. This is about as good and about as old as it gets. Beersheva is an ancient place. It's mentioned in the Bible, actually, but the town itself today is a very modern, particularly ugly city, and these are the oldest buildings that they are. They're Ottoman, 19th century Ottoman. The old town was laid out in a grid pattern in the 19th century. Beersheba is a town that's really well known to me because when I was living in Israel on the kibbutz, this was like the kind of place we came to buy anything. So we would come and get alcohol here, or we would go out for a coffee, or in the evening here sometimes. Again, not the world's most exciting cities to go to, but yeah, it's quite cool to be back. And I guess, as we said last night, that's the thing with this. It is a bit of a trip down memory lane in some ways, this part of my trip. There is another point that's interesting, and perhaps in context with some of the stuff that will be seen later, and that is that I mentioned that Beersheba is in the Bible, and it is, and it's one real mention is that it's the place where, if you know the story of Abraham, so Abraham he's told by God that he will have descendants as numerous as the stars, but his wife's very old, Sarah. So what he does is he has a bit with his maidservant, Hagar, and then Sarah gets pregnant. So what he does, being such a righteous and holy man, he just sends the servant away with his son, Ishmael, and they are sent away into the desert, into the Negev desert, it says, which is where we are now. And wait a second. And Hagar basically almost dies. And then she prays to God, and he guides her to a spring. And the spring it saves her life and Ishmael's life. And then basically Ishmael becomes the father of all the Arabs. Now, that's an important story because the fact is, if you know anything about Islam, Islam is basically based on the legend actually about the Abraham legend and the descendancy from Ishmael. And in Islam it says that all this happened not in Beersheva, but in Mecca, or Bakka as it's called in the Quran. So that will be important later. Now, there is a site in the centre of the city that is said to be the site of the well, and they've reconstructed a bit of an ancient well there. So when I go past it, I'll point it out. Here we are. This is the pulsating heart of the old city of Beersheba. I say pulsating heart because actually most of the business these days is done in new shopping centres. And when I was there, when I lived there in 97, the first big shopping centre, the Canyon, it's called, was opened, and it was all a bit of a Brave New World thing. The city also changed dramatically, and the changes started in the 90s when I was there, in that it became very Russian. And if you look at some of these shop signs, you will see some Russian writing. Beersheba might be a majority Russian city. These days, and when I was there it was perhaps just over 100,000. It's probably over 200,000 now. Lots and lots of Russian immigrants have moved to Beersheba and made it their home. So it has quite a different character to some of the other places. And of course, I mean, there's that gentleman there who's evident. It is also quite a big Bedouin population. It's one of the main centres for the Bedouin. Now, over here, you can see this thing there. That is the reconstruction of the well. There we are. Obviously that does not date from biblical times. But it is quite cool to think that I spent last night within a couple of 100 metres really of one of the most seminal events in world history. If of course that did actually happen and it's not just a myth or a legend. But anyway, there we are, this is Beersheva, and I'm now going to head onwards through Beersheva bus station to Eilat. So I'm now in Beersheva bus station. Here's the main bus station in Beersheva, and I'm eating a falafel. And actually, the reason I'm doing this is because I really like falafels. But it was in Israel that I very first tasted falafel. I'd never even heard of the concept before. So yeah, that's quite weird to think, since so many people are familiar with it these days in Britain. But back then things were a lot more insular. Another little point to point out is that if you have a look around here, there's lots and lots of young soldiers milling around. Israel is probably the most militarized country in the world, possible exception DPRK, and so that was another big culture shock for me when I was there, and there's just all these soldiers walking around everywhere, often very young, often very attractive, in uniform, carrying M16s. The people who were with me back then in Israel 20 odd years ago, the Beersheva bus stations changed. This all used to be open to the elements here, and the buses pulled in as they do now, but they've enclosed it in and made it a bit of a kind of a shopping mall now. So anyway, here we are in Beersheva bus station. which marks the border itself. There's not a lot on the Jordanian side, if we're honest. It seems to be a bit of a complex up there on a hill, but that's it. So there is Jordan. I'm on another Egged bus now, but this one's in a museum and it ain't going anywhere very fast. And this is one of the kind of 1950s buses that Egged used when they started their service. I think 54, 56 it said that the road was opened to Eilat. So this is the proper pioneer type bus. And according to the lady on the reception desk, there was a murder on this bus and it's quite famous. So there we are. And there, through the window, is Eilat. So, I've made it to Eilat, and there, behind me, that square box building is actually the Ottoman outpost that the Israelis captured in 1949, and that marked the establishment of the city. Here's the city today. It's a bit of a Las Vegas of Israel, as you can see, with all the big hotels out there. But beyond it, and those mountains and that city over there, that's Aqaba in Jordan, and that's where I'm heading next. That is terra incognita for me, but this is actually a very familiar ground. When I was in Israel on the kibbutz, I came down here several times, and I really enjoyed it. And I mean, it's a bit, it's a tourist resort, it's a crass, pretty shallow place, but you know what, when you're 18, 19, that's what you want. We used to drink in a pub over there called the Underground. It doesn't seem to be there anymore. And I remember going once, spending it down the beach with one of the most beautiful women I ever met, which, do you know what, when you're 19, that shit matters. Yeah, it's a nice place. I have a soft spot for Eilat. Okay, it's not cultural, it's not deep, but it's nice. Sort of place you can see yourself retiring in. But anyway, that is Eilat. Now I'm going to go and head over there for my next new country, Jordan.
Back to the tree. Yes, I said yes. It's okay. There's one person you can take it to give you back. Even the landscape, the way it's good to travel.
Bravo. Yeah, the lines of granite.